Hi everyone, welcome to the Hidden Track. I'm Ben Goldstein. I'm really pleased to be joined today by John Etheridge, a legendary jazz rock guitarist. He has a long career going back decades with Soft Machine. He also has a prolific solo career and many other projects over the years. So John, welcome to the show. It's great to be with you.
Hi, Ben. Good to be with you too.
So you recently wrapped up a series of dates with Soft Machine in the UK. Of course,
Mhm.
you know before that you did a tour of the states. I think it was last year. How have these dates been going, and how is the current lineup of the band sort of gelling together right now?
Well, I have to say straight off that the current lineup for the band is, for me, the best it's ever been. In fact, I would say that it's the best band I've ever been in. The current lineup of Soft Machine is the best band I've ever been in, and obviously, Soft Machine is something I felt really loyal to for 50 years, and all the incarnations have been great. But this is stupendous now. We got a couple of new guys. I mean, John Marshall passed away. John, of course, was one of the great drummers of the world, certainly in Europe, one of the best known drummers and one of the greatest. And but he passed away a couple of years ago, and he was playing great till the end. But obviously, when you get to 80 odd and you're not very well, the drums is a bit of a cruel mistress. So now Asaf's joined, and we've got so much power, and then we've got Fred Baker on bass, who took over from Roy Babington because Roy got. I'm holding my hand up this to show. Roy got a kind of trigger finger thing, and he got it mended once, and it came back again. So he had to bow out. He's still with us, and quite happy. He's got a lot of. He's one of those people who has a lot of things going on in his life. And then there's me and Theo, and it's absolutely burning. And as you say, we did three tours of the States: October 23, June 24, and October 24. Quite challenging, but we can get onto that if you want to ask questions. Um, yeah, very challenging actually on a lot of levels, but great. I mean, I find the audiences in America, I think partly because of these extraordinary visa issues,
Hmm.
which I have to say straight off is completely unfair because we can't come and play in America, but American musicians can come here and just play, which of course we love to see you guys, but I mean, you can just come. There's no restrictions. I think it's £60 or something for the visa, whereas we have to go through this extraordinary process. So the upshot of that is if you do make it over to America and you're a medium grade, medium level band, people are very pleased to see you. And we had the audiences were wonderful in America, but the whole economic thing was very, very difficult. And then we've just done some dates in November. We always do March, April, and November. A couple of them opposite Coliseum. John Heisman, well, what was John Heisman's Coliseum, but it's now Coliseum because John's gone. Um, and well, the band is going really, really well. Touch wood. I mean, I'm touching wood because and it's and the new album, which is coming out in March,
Hmm.
is really something. I mean, it's basically produced by Theo, more or less. I mean, I've sort of before we've been joint producers, but he's really kind of got hold of the reins now, and he's really on the case and all sorts of stuff. And there's all sorts of the logistic stuff, which is hard work,
Right.
producing stuff. Anyway,
And Theo is a fantastic player and musician, and he's been working with you now for a long time, right? So you two must have a great chemistry together.
well, we do actually, funnily enough, because I say funnily enough because often you can work for people for years, and there's it sort of doesn't necessarily come together that well. But he's been in with us since 2006, February 2006. So he's coming up for 20 years with what was called the Soft Machine Legacy, but it's the same thing really. But yeah, he's fantastic. But the thing is about Theo, I mean, he joined us to replace Elton Dean, so he's just playing really sax and flute. And gradually he's expanded, and he plays kind of just the right keyboards that I like. In other words, not intrusive. just if I've written something or he's written something that's got harmonies, it's kind of nice to have somebody delineating those harmonies on the keyboard, and he does a lot of sounds on the computer, and he writes terrific stuff, which is a lot of which is on our new album, and he's overall, you know, a real. He's sort of become more and more and more of an asset, and he and I get on very well. We all seem to moderately agree about everything. Very occasionally we have a little disputation about a mix or something, but not often. You know, which instrument is too loud. The usual arguments that people have during mixing. But basically, we get on fantastically well. And so I guess you would say that we are, it is a democracy, but Theo and I kind of are the, me because I'm the soft machine guy who's been in it for 50 years, and Theo because he's a kind of natural organizer and leader as well as being a great musician. So it works really well, and all the characters. This is another thing that very is, well, unique actually in my experience of playing with bands. Everybody complements each other somehow just right. When we were in America, there were times when we were really up against it. You know, things were really tough, and instead of falling apart, we came together. And I think that is to do with the various personalities, different personalities, and their capabilities. And I'm not just talking about music, I'm talking about on the road, in the van. And so we survived quite tricky situations in America, and got stronger from it, which is great.
You mentioned you're in the process of making a new album, or you're pretty far along in that process, right? The last album...
Well, it's done. It's done.
Okay.
The new album is done.
So what can you tell us about the upcoming album?
Oh, I can tell you a lot about it. Go on, ask me a question.
I mean,
more specific.
The most recent one, where it was the Other Doors record, that was in I think 22. So it's been a few years since then. Is the are you guys going for?
Well, hang on a sec, Ben. Other Doors was recorded in 22. It came out in 23.
Okay.
This was recorded, April 25, and it's going to come out. It's seems to be a long process, but there's production of vinyl, and you know, it's just nowadays it all seems to take a hell of a long time. But I can tell you a lot. I mean, first of all, it is really strong. I think really strong. As I say, the band is the best for me, the best it's ever been. So you really notice that immediately. I mean, people said Other Doors was mellow. Well, I don't think it was mellow. I think one of the things was John was very, very ill, John Marshall. And he plays beautifully on it, but it's not got the same intensity that he had when he was a young man. So Azaf's playing his arse off, you know, it's like full on. And Fred Baker's just great on the bass. So we've got a really, really strong, what you call a rhythm section. It's not quite that in Soft Machine, because, you know, everything we do, one of the things about Soft Machine, we're not aiming to nail down some funk groove or something like that. That's not the point, you know. I mean, really, it's four people equal when we play, you know. So Fred is really, really active on the bass, and Azaf is very active on the drums, and that's a permanent thing. So there's no sort of sitting in the pocket while Theo and I sail over the top. It's not like that at all. And that's one of the things I really like about it. I mean, everybody's involved. You know, it's great. You know, it's not bebop. They're not sitting back accompanying the soloist and then, you know. You know, and some very, very strong compositions. And interestingly enough, Azaf has got three beautiful little gem-like compositions. I think it's three, might be four. Three gem-like compositions on the album. Theo's written a couple of like set pieces. I've got a couple of tunes. Fred's got one. So everybody's chipping in with the writing. Before it was just me and Theo. So everybody's chipping in with the writing. And Azaf's tunes are very quirky, because what he does is, this is such a good thing. The way it's like how a lot of you know, I don't know what you call rock artists or something, right? In other words, he doesn't really play piano. He plays piano a bit, so he goes and picks out some chords and a bit of melody. So it's absolutely not from the harmonic manual of chords. You know, they're really, really quirky and interesting, and that's great. You know, that's it's a kind of creativity you get. I mean, as an example of that, I did, you know, as you say, I've done so lots of stuff over the 50 odd years I've been doing this, and I did a silent movie improvisation with Jarvis Cocker from Pulp. Okay, and there were lots of school musicians there, classical musicians and things, but it was Jarvis who just had a sort of stylophone and a kind of keyboard. Because he didn't really play it, he'd come up with some bizarre idea, some bizarre thing, and then we'd sort of play off that. And so Azaf's composition is really interesting. I say Theo's got he's got one long set piece and another one, and I've got a couple, and then what we always do. It sounds like a formula, but of course it's not a formula because we do these free improv. It's easy to say, isn't it? Free improvisations that you know, from nothing, and that's kind of speciality of ours actually. And I think they're great. And there's 4 or 5. If you include the vinyls, there's like 3 or 4 of them, all completely different, and they're just from nothing improvisations. And I'm sure there are people doing that, but I don't, you know. But it's quite special for us. So we usually have a few of those. We usually have, then we do an old. We usually put in a new version of an old tune, and we've got now. We definitely have. We put "Joy of a Toy" was on Other Doors, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
sorry, I should have this information in front of me, but there will be one or two of the old tunes on there too. God, sorry, folks. You'll have to wait for the album to come out because we do like to. I particularly like to do the old tunes, but without listening to them. That's how I like to do it. You know, in other words, just hear the melody and do your own version. Sometimes we're doing some of the old tunes, and sometimes I hear them, the old versions, and I go, "Oh, we're a bit close to that. Let's avoid that. Mustn't do that," because it's not in the spirit of Soft Machine. It's certainly not in the spirit of when I grew up. Well, which is another discussion point. Go on.
It's interesting, right? Because a lot of the old tunes, right, don't have guitars in them. So you.
Oh, that's exactly right. Exactly right. So when we used to do them, I remember Chloe and the Pirates. Hugh Hopper brought that in 2006 to play on the album Steve. Just brought in the top line. Okay, and some chords, and I just did a guitar part under the melody. Now I know this sounds almost rude, but I don't think I've actually listened to the original ever, because it's actually a theory of mine. I really don't want to, because if we're going to do them, I want to pay respect to the composition, the melody of the composition, but I want to do it in a way that is, you know, us. And this is actually very much a sort of philosophical break, because growing up in the 60s and 70s, it was absolutely anathema, against the grain, to play from the past. Now, for instance, I'd fallen in love with Django Reinhardt, who you couldn't really hear. So I used to play a bit of Django. People thought that was so weird. What are you playing this old stuff for? Well, what? That's not music now. That was music then. Music now is like this. And then starting in the mid-70s, coincidentally about the time I joined Stéphane Grappelli, and he had a renaissance, this is when people started saying, oh, the past, we like that. And then, of course, in the 80s, with the Wynton Marsalis movement in jazz became playing somewhere from the past. And very soon you kind of picked an era you were going to play from and did that. And then we got into the postmodern era, where nearly everything is kind of backwards looking. And this really showed up for me with the Stéphane Grappelli thing, which, you know, in case you didn't know or people didn't know, I played with Stéphane Grappelli for years. Mm-hmm. The great jazz violinist who played with Django Reinhardt. I mean, how could I refuse? I was playing with the Soft Machine, and I get this call to play with Stéphane Grappelli. And I'm going, well, this is mad, but I'm not going to turn it down because it's Stéphane Grappelli, you know, Django Reinhardt's violinist, or well, sorry, he hated that. The violinist who, you know, the co-leader of the Hot Club Quintet of France with Django Reinhardt. I've got to play with him. So his Renaissance coincided with this thing in the late 70s, the start of cultivating the past. And the first musician I heard doing this was Scott Hamilton, the saxophone player. You may not have heard of him, but Scott Hamilton, in about 77, 78, we heard about this guy who was playing like Zoot Sims, or, you know, and he was 24. And we're going, hey, why is a 24-year-old bloke playing like Zoot Sims? Now, of course, I mean, it was a ridiculous thing to be amazed by, because everybody plays, everybody goes to school, everybody is educated in jazz history, and a lot of it is playing what you could actually have to call a pastiche of the past. Now, I don't want to do a pastiche of old soft machine tunes. I really don't, because it's not the spirit of the band that I was in the 70s. It's not the spirit of the original band to do that. So you've got to be a bit disruptive. So I try to be a bit disruptive. Put a spanner in the works if it's sounding a bit too like we're trying to recreate. If you're going to recreate, you're a tribute act, aren't you? You know, if we recreate Soft Machine Third with and put little Ratledge glasses on or something, that's a tribute act. This isn't a tribute act in any way. So to get back to the point, when we do an old tune, I'm very keen to do it personally, to do it. And as you say, as your initial point, it was a keyboard band for Soft Machine. So the fact that, I mean, Theo is playing quite a lot of keyboards, but for years it was saxophone, guitar, bass, and drums. You know, Hugh Hopper, John Marshall, myself, Elton, then Theo, and so I covered all the, and I really like that actually. I covered the middle ground.
Yeah,
you know, with pedals.
Now it's interesting, right? Because you guys are decidedly not a nostalgia band. You know, it's 2025. Maybe you could have done a 50th anniversary bundles tour, but you guys, right? You're always moving forward, progressing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If I said I'm not interested in that, I wouldn't be interested in it from the Soft Machine point of view. If I did say a Steely Dan tribute, I'd like to do it as close to the original as possible, just as a kind of, as a proper tribute. But I'm not interested in tributing Soft Machine, and we're not. And so it's really. I mean, I think the other thing that makes this one of the best Soft Machine entities, and we've done this for a bit, is that it incorporates, I think, all the bits of the band over the years from 67 to 1980. All the sort of bits of the band are incorporated, except the vocals. But there's the sort of, the improvisational element, there's the sort of chaotic element, there's the virtuoso fusion element. There's these elements which at the time were quite shocking, because the Soft Machine, the thing that really, made the Soft Machine not stop the Soft Machine from being hugely successful, was these big jumps into different territories. So you'd get Kevin Ayres and Robert and songs and things, and then you'd get Third, and then you'd get Marshall and Holsworth and sort of kind of like virtuoso playing, and all those elements. Each incarnation of Soft Machine had a lot of quality of its own and a lot of validity of its own. And then you move to the next piece, but the next incarnation might be completely different. So it confused the audience, I think. So when I joined in 75, there were people who really liked it, but there was quite a lot of animosity from the critics, because this has all changed into something that we don't recognize as being Kevin Ayres, and I had no problem with that because I wanted to be with John Marshall, Roy Babington particularly, because they were my kind of heroes, jazz heroes. And of course, Holsworth was in it before, so taking over from him was a big challenge, huge challenge. And so I was very, very keen, and I wasn't bothered about the non-reference to the history. I wasn't bothered at all. But the point is, it's always been non-referential to the past. So I think we reference the past a bit. We also, as I say, do the old tunes in our own way, and then we've got plenty of new tunes. And I think it's really lucky, and it's a proper band. I've been leading bands and being sidemen or whatever, but this is a proper democratic outfit. I mean, it really is, and it's so much more relaxing for me to be playing with this band than, say, leading a band. I mean, everybody assumes that you want to be the main man. Well, on some level, I do want to be the main man, but I'm very happy to be playing my arse off, if I can, in a group environment where it's not just about me. So if I do jazz gigs, for better or worse, if it's the John Etheridge trio band or whatever, it's me and guys, and I'm expected to, come up with everything in a way. Not everything, because the guys really play, but you know what I mean. And that's meant to be what you're meant to aspire to. But I'm afraid I don't really. I'm my happiest days, I think, apart from the soft machine thing, which is great, was when I was playing with Stéphane Grappelli and I was a featured sideman. That's lovely, to be a featured sideman. So you get endless solos, but you don't have to worry about, how many people are at the gig, or talking to the promoter, or you so much you don't have to think about when you're a featured sideman. So with the soft machine, it's a really good compromise, because I am, sort of, me and Theo, sort of the leaders, but the others are totally involved as well. And it's not just about me, it's about the band. And of course, it comes with a history that we can pay respect to. So for me, it's really good. I mean, that suits my character, that's all,
So, obviously, right, the band is constantly evolving. But there's also a strand of continuity, in the sound of Soft Machine. And, there's sort of an atmosphere that defines the band's music, right? How would you describe what makes a Soft Machine song, and how does it tie together what you're doing, on the more recent records with the stuff you were doing, all the way back in the 70s?
Well, what's interesting, in your question to me is you almost call it spirit of place. People talk about spirit of place, and when I'm playing with the soft machine, I seem to play in a way that I don't play with anybody else. I can't play with anybody else, and it's very odd. And this is another thing that I think people don't understand is, when they hear somebody play, they assume it's a sort of complete consciously directed thing from the performer, from the musician. Well, it's not like that. There's a sort of spirit that comes into me when I'm playing with soft machine. It may be because, I took over from Alan and I sort of promoted the Bundles album, and I was already playing something like that. But maybe for me, but also, so that could be something to do with it. But I'm also getting in touch with the way I played in the 70s with the band. It's like I'm getting in touch with my younger self, which is a nice feeling. But, I played for years with John Williams, the classical guitarist, and I certainly didn't play like I do with the soft machine. With John Williams, I mean, he would have fallen off his chair, wouldn't he? I mean, it would be totally inappropriate. Turn up and whack it up and start playing blistering solos. I mean, that wasn't, you're always, for me, and this gets back to this thing about being a leader or not, is I'm always trying to fit in, sounds a bit feeble, but be part of something and be a contributor to the thing with reference to what the thing is. right? So soft machine. So there is a continuity, which you've spotted, which I think is, but I think this continuity is almost unconscious. Somehow, when we put on our soft machine hat, something comes out, and it I find it liberating because I really feel that I can contact the things in my playing that they haven't been buried, but they've been sort of sidelined through the years by my playing, acoustic jazz with Stéphane Grappelli, and then doing a group that was kind of a tribute to Stéphane, which I enjoyed doing, but it was acoustic guitar, and I really feel that, I'm an electric guitarist playing the acoustic guitar, but I enjoyed it, and we did some great gigs, great violinist, etc. And then, of course, playing with John Williams as a duo all over America and things. I mean, the way I play with him, obviously things are very organised with him. He doesn't improvise, so we're really organised. I mean, I play solos and things, but our set is really organised. So, and I was fine with that. I was quite comfortable with that. But this is the spirit of soft machine, as you've highlighted, is really something that seems to really exist. And I suppose when I'm writing for the band, I do know who I'm writing for, So I wrote a few bit of stuff for John and I, and of course you do write generally with the people in mind. In fact, you've really got to. And I do know there was one tune I wrote called Greyhound, and I wrote it for Hugh Hopper and Elton Dean and John Marshall myself, and I didn't really actually. It's one of those times where I wrote something and then forced them to play it, and they didn't really like it. It wasn't until Babington, Marshall, myself, and Theo got stuck into this tune that anybody enjoyed it. So, but generally, I would write sort of with the people in mind, and that helps me to write if I know who I'm writing for, what they like, what they want to do, because I want to please them to a certain extent. So they'll go, oh, that's good to play. Oh, I like playing that. Oh, yeah.
Do you think you sort of absorbed some of the approach from some of the the former Soft Machine band members who are no longer here? I mean, not to linger on this point, but you guys don't sound like the other jazz fusion groups from that period.
No, absolutely not.
You have a
Absolutely not, and never did. I mean, I suppose when I was in it, when I was in it in the 70s, it was the sort of preeminent European jazz fusion group, but that sort of jazz fusion thing is definitely not where we're at. In fact, interestingly, when Fred Baker couldn't get his visa to go to America, Leonardo, our manager, suggested a whole lot of great bass guitarists who might deputize. But I thought, no, they're all wrong. None of them would be right for the band, because there's a kind of jazz fusion virtuosity, not that we're not interested in that area, but it's not appropriate for us. And so it's not a jazz fusion band in that sense. Although I suppose if people push me and go, what's your band, Soft Machine? What does it do? I go, well, kind of jazz, rock, jazz fusion, that sort of thing. And but they'll mention some bands, and I'll go, well, it's not really like that. It's not really like that. I have to say, it's inescapable. But when I was doing it, in '75, there was a bit of a Marvishnu influence. I mean, Bundles is a little bit. It's got a sort of a hint of the Marvishnu about it, perhaps more than a hint, really. But Carl Jenkins is a very characteristic writer, and Carl Jenkins, nearly all his writing is very identifiable as him, and he was the main writer when I was in the band. And Tales of Taliesin, for instance, is sort of, you might call a sort of a benchmark composition of his. It's a really, quite particular sounding, So the band always had a particular feel, and the earlier band, I was talking about this with Ratledge, who was a great friend of mine, We didn't talk about music a hell of a lot, but we'd get together every 2 or 3 weeks down in Soho and hang out. And we weren't particularly friendly when he was in the band because the situation in the band wasn't a particularly friendly one, but we became friendly afterwards. And he was saying that basically the sound of the Soft Machine came from him and Hugh Hopper trying to work out jazz stuff and getting it wrong. So we get it wrong and we play it and it sounds like us, and I'll tell you what, I mean, there are a lot of jazz stylists who have their own particular style because they were bad imitators. In other words, they wanted to sound like somebody, but they ended up sounding like themselves. And so there's usually a cycle with people where they want to sound exactly like so-and-so. They don't make it. They get frustrated with themselves. Then somebody says, "Oh, yeah, but what you're doing sounds great. It sounds quite original." And then they go, "Ooh." A lot of players were like that. Even Alan, I think, was a bit like that. He wanted to do, a lot of guys. And I remember talking to Pat Metheny about this. And he's saying, when I first met him in 1976, he's saying, "Well, I wanted to pick, really fast, but I had to find a different way of doing it." And there must have been, probably was a moment where he thought, "Oh," and then he realizes that what he's doing is actually personal, special, and sounds different. And then you're happy, happier with it.
Well, also, right, I mean, not like some of the bands, right? You guys weren't wankers, There's a sort of the technique versus feel.
Yes.
You guys always leaned into feel over just playing for playing's sake.
Yes, I guess so. I mean, this is what also is enjoyable about it, is because all this stuff. I think one of the advantages is particularly, say, Hugh Hopper, John Marshall, myself, and Elton Dean, is that none of us went to school. So I'm John Marshall. Let's talk about John for a bit because he's brilliant. I mean, John Marshall was in many ways an eccentric drummer because he had his own thing, and because he hadn't been to school, there were things he didn't really do. Whereas if you've been educated properly, you can play across the board. But amazing power, amazing creativity, and brilliant force of personality. And I think that's one of the advantages of not having been through the process of education. Music education has a lot of advantages, or jazz education has a lot of good things about it. You get to understand, and you don't have holes, particularly for oneself. I mean, I know John felt like I do about myself, and Hugh Hopper would have, if we'd all got together and talked about this, to say, yeah, I've got my own thing and I like it, but there are great holes in my armory. And all of us had holes in our armory but having the holes in the armory meant that what we did, it also applies to Hugh. I mean, in a way, Hugh Hopper even more. If you're going to book a bass guitarist for a gig, you book a bass guitarist. But if you're going to book Hugh Hopper, you get Hugh Hopper. You say, "I want Hugh Hopper." And I don't then tell him to play like Jack Bruce or something. I go, "Hugh, I want you, John Marshall. I want John Marshall." And that's very different because I had a flirtation's the wrong word. I did kind of sessions for a bit. I wasn't very good because my reading wasn't that good. But, there in that world, you go, give me 16 bars of James Brown funk. Yeah, give me 18 bars of Santana lead or something. And if you're a really good session man, you do all that, right? So Soft Machine was not a band, even though Roy Babington was a bit of a session man. Luckily, Roy Babington, as well as being a session man, was also an eccentric. So everybody who came into that band was a bit of a maverick. And that means that it didn't get hung up on particular areas, and there was always conflicts. I mean, John Marshall was I remember you talking about, chops technique. I remember once we were reading this little article, and it was talk about Alan Holdsworth, and it said, John Marshall said, Alan had an excessive technique, etc. And John Marshall said, I would never say that. To me, there's no such thing as an excessive technique. So, there was a kind of desire to be the great, but because of various character things, it didn't come out like that. And that's really good. The problem is if you get 4 musicians who can play anything, and they decide to say, do a jazz fusion band, it'll sound like the ultimate jazz fusion band with incredibly clean, fast playing, but it won't have character. And the character comes from the flaws, if you like.
Yeah, that might be what it is. When you look at, Hugh Hopper and Mike Ratledge, these guys who kind of shaped this sound, right? They didn't come from the jazz world originally. They came from this psychedelic Canterbury thing.
Exactly. And they, Mike's organ sound was he played so many notes because if he stopped, the whole thing fed back, apparently. Because he had his Lowry through a fuzz box, right? So he did that thing. And the reason why he didn't stop was because if he stopped, the whole thing would feed back. So you get a style that's based on something like that. I mean, one thing people have got to really understand about so many musicians is how they play, and it's not necessarily about sitting down with a plan and saying, I want to play like that, I want to play like that. It's how it comes out. And when people write books or obituaries, they always make it sound like the musician in question is completely conscious of everything and has made a deliberate career decision on this. I can give you an example. I did an album with a singer called Leanne Carroll, fabulous singer here we've got called Leanne Carroll. And it was quartet, myself, organ, drums, and voice. And halfway through, the drummer goes, oh, bloody hell, I've got a sound check with Mark Murphy at Ronnie Scott's. So he just buggers off, leaves. So we did half the album with a trio. So people go, well, what an interesting decision. Because that was how it turned out. And so much of things is how it turns out. And so much of people's playing. And of course, historical analysis loves to see everything as inevitable, everything as a conscious, oh yes, then they decided to do this, and then they decided to do that. But life happens, you see, and life just happens, and it takes you on these paths, and you go on them, or you don't. I mean, the only difference with me, I think, and a lot of people is, say, for instance, when I'm playing with Soft Machine, and the Stéphane Grappelli thing came up, I'm thinking, well, I can't turn down Stéphane Grappelli, can I? But other people might say, no, in fact, I did turn it down at first, actually. And very luckily for me, the guy who was running the band, Diz Disley, it was like a woman turning down a bloke. And he decided to persevere. He couldn't believe it. He said, I've offered you a job with Stéphane Grappelli, and you're going to turn it down because you're playing with some pop group. And luckily he did persevere, because I thought, well, I can't leave the guys in the lurch and go off with Stéphane Grappelli. I went to see them. It's the Soft Machine, 1976. I went 77. I went to see them, and I said, well, look, I've got this 3-month world tour that Stéphane Grappelli offered. And they said, well, we've only got 2 or 3 gigs. We can get Alan to do them. So that's how it happened, But initially, I turned that down. And the same thing when John Williams said, do you want to do something? I went, I can't play with John Williams. The greatest classical guitarist in the world. A bluffer like me. How can I play with John Williams? But I thought, I've got to give it a go. I've got to fight through the fear and give it a go. And so I did, and in the end, it was great. 20 years. Well, No, actually, yeah, 18 years on and off with John Williams.
Well, there's a real
Duos, band.
yeah. I was gonna say there's a real spontaneity to the band's music, and of course, you guys for some reason get everyone likes to label things. You guys get called progressive rock. Soft Machine, in my opinion, it's not really a progressive rock band.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not jazz fusion. It's not progressive rock. It's definitely got a strong jazz element. I mean, it has right from the moment Robert Wyatt left. They veered towards that, which of course explains why they didn't become a huge band like Pink Floyd. If they'd stuck with the Robert Wyatt method, and let's just think about Pink Floyd for a moment. The Pink Floyd is very, very parallel. These two bands, Pink Floyd and Soft Machine, were equal at UFO. Both had a maverick character, Syd Barrett, Robert Wyatt. Both singing in Cockney accents. Don't know who started it. Both writing songs, crazy songs. They ditched Syd Barrett in the 1970, 69. Soft Machine ditched Robert Wyatt 69, 70. Both of them were impossible characters at the time. And, they're all agreed about that. Pink Floyd, I have to say, I met Dave Gilmour the day he joined Pink Floyd, right? David Gilmour. And he came into this pub. I was sitting there in Cambridge with some friends who knew the Floyd. And he said, I've joined Pink Floyd. And I thought to myself, well, enjoy that for a few months, Dave, because without Syd Barrett, there's no chance. But of course, what they did with it, Roger Waters stepped up, took over, wrote the songs, and of course the rest is history. Well, Soft Machine got rid of Robert Wyatt, and then instead of carrying on with a song thing, they went into the jazz world, which Ratledge loved. So they went into the jazz thing and became totally instrumental, which is always going to limit your appeal. And then they had a catastrophic period after Third. Third was okay, did very well. And then the whole Phil Howard era practically finished the band off, almost finished it off. There's a legendary story John Marshall told me that basically the band with Phil Howard went to France, huge crowds. By half time, there was nobody left in the club.
Wow. And
all the promoters got together and went, what are we going to do? What's going to happen to the Soft Machine? So this may be a kind of, I'm not saying whose fault all this was, but this is how it happened, because they espoused free. You went on and improvised, ear-splitting volume, and so they took that. Well, that's the way it went. And so that really was the point where Soft Machine, I mean, certainly when I joined in 75, it was still the biggest name in what you'd call jazz, prog, fusion in Europe. Never meant much in America. But in Europe, it was a big deal, still a big deal, So, so for me, it was to join Soft Machine was an incredible honor. I mean, I was knocked out, totally knocked out. I couldn't believe it, I was like, wow, I've joined Soft Machine. Can't believe it.
Well, yeah.
So I'm
and
very pleased.
Those were incredible albums they were making after Third, Fourth, and Fifth, and Sixth, and Seventh. I mean,
yes, of course.
Amazing music.
I didn't know that much about them. What I knew was I'd gone to the Rainbow. I knew they were big, obviously. And I had a friend who was a complete Soft Machine fanatic. So he'd play me stuff, which I appreciated. And then I saw them at opposite Larry Coryell's 11th House. Mm-hmm. And it was Holsworth, Babington, Marshall, and Jenkins, and Ratledge. And, the guitar was amazing. It wasn't, something about the sound wasn't quite right, but it was really, very impressive. So I'm going, wow, that was impressive. And then the next thing is, Alan phones me up from America. Holsworth phoned me up from America and said, well, man, have they got in touch with you? And I went, no. So long and short of it was I got I fixed up an audition with them, and so I joined. And then the best thing for me was phoning my soft machine freak friend. Go, hello, Dave. Oh, man, how are you doing? I said, guess what? I don't know, man. What? I said, I've joined soft machine. He went, wow, what? That's not possible. My mate is joined soft machine. So, it was great. And it was a real kind of, I really felt like this is, I was so chuffed to be in it. So thrilled to be in it. And that's why I'm thrilled still to be part of it,
From this vantage point, like looking back, it's amazing to think there was a big audience at the time, or a sizable audience for this kind of music, because there's nothing like it now, and the attention spans of everyone is so short, right? No one listens to this kind of complex jazz rock.
I don't know, Ben, but what you talk about, I mean, the whole environment. How old are you?
I'm 32.
Well, mate, I'm afraid to say, let me make you weep with envy. I mean, the scene in the early 70s. I mean, not only would people listen to this music, you could get an enormous advance to record it and get incredibly well paid to play it. I mean, it's ludicrous. The first band I was in, Darrell Way's Wolf. Darrell Way was the violinist in a band called Candid. Pretty successful in Britain, but not sensational. He left, formed his own band. There was a sort of record company scrum to hand out an advance, right? And we're playing sort of semi-Marvish new, semi-jazz rock, all instrumental. Well, there were a few vocals, but basically an instrumental band. And we're playing, this is 1972, 73, we're playing kind of, it's not Marvish, but it's sort of that area, because it's guitar and violin. And, not only the record companies are sort of lining up, not they're not crazy for it, but so we got £27,000 advance, which is equivalent now of about £500,000. Wow. Say $750,000 advance to make albums for music that, if you hear, if you went and listened to some of the Darrell Way's Wolf album, I mean, they've got quality, but you think, I mean, there was a sort of big audience for this kind of music. I mean, big audience. I mean, people like, you're talking about Yes and Genesis and these people, enormous audiences for this sort of stuff, and huge amounts of money. Now, if I got 27,000 quid in that figure for a band I was in advance, I think, blimey, I mean, the money has just evaporated from this areas of music. In fact, I think the whole financial situation is just like it is in the real world. You've got the Taylor Swift, who's the equivalent of Elon Musk, $200 billion. And then you've got everybody groveling for like, I don't know what people get paid in America for doing gigs, but I'll tell you what, I mean, I don't do these gigs, but there are gigs being done for like, say, $75, $80, right? That were $80 40 years ago. So it's collapsed financially, and I mean, the money we go out for is, well, I could tell you that Darrell Way's Wolf, I mean, we shouldn't talk too much about money, but it's interesting for a young guy like you. Darrell Way's Wolf, the second gig we did in Newcastle, this is 1970, January 73. It was a door split, and the roadie said, and he was quite thrilled. He said, "Oh, we've got made £500." Now, £500 is it's got to be $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 on the door in Newcastle.
Wow!
You can look it up. I may be exaggerating, but it's certainly. And that was just a violinist who's quite well known with his new band, playing instrumental music. And I was playing like I do, I was doing my bit, and which was great because the journalists really got behind me, and because everybody got fed up with the Eric Clapton thing by then. So I was doing a thing which was sort of bit McLaughlin, bit whatever. Well, kind of like I do, like I play now, really, but with not such a good sound. And so I was doing that, and you know, I mean, it's well, we could talk for hours about what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's the same in America. It certainly is here, and I think you know, I go to Italy and play with Italians, and you play with some fabulous musicians. Nearly all of them have got another job because, you know, they can't make a living as a musician.
Right. Now, obviously, right, the tastes have changed, and I'm just curious, you know, the narrative goes, right, in the late 70s, you know, punk rock and disco and all that. Did you feel that kind of seismic change at the time as the audiences were kind of moving on from progressive and
that's very interesting because yeah, I had there was a hiatus for me around 74 before I joined the Soft Machine in 75. Now, the thing about punk, I really feel that in a way the influence of that was very exaggerated because most of the prog rock bands, I mean, certainly Soft Machine carried on almost without noticing anything. You think of the great bands like Genesis and that, they just carried on, particularly in America. And supposedly the press, you see that at the time in Britain, there was a centralized music press that formed opinions, that directed taste. And they decided in 1976 that prog was boring and got to get rid of it, and that this punk thing was. And so it was very, very touted in the press. So assumed the kind of importance, which I think in the real world it didn't really have. But the journalists like writing about it. I mean, people like Caroline Coon and Julie Burchill have admitted that actually, when they went home, they put on R&B and the Isley Brothers and things. But they championed these punk guys because it was good to write about the attitude, and I'm not belittling them because I don't mind. I'm quite happy with the Clash and even the Sex Pistols. I mean, to me, I'm fine with it, no problem. But I think it was exaggerated, the change. The real change came in 80, 81. That's when everything collapsed for us with, you know, Ultravox and Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark and the DX7. And by the way, I was the first guitarist to play with a DX7 in the band, Yamaha demonstration in Frankfurt. And that was a completely humiliating experience. It was almost like the end of the guitar. So we played our trio. I'm playing a Yamaha guitar, DX7, brand new, and drums. And when it finished, everybody went for the DX7. I had to fight my way out. Nobody took any notes of the guitar playing. I couldn't give a shit. Anyway, to get back to the point, the real change was around 80, 81. And that's when all the prog bands stopped, fell apart. And suddenly they weren't wanted. It wasn't punk. It was the 80s. The 80s was a very, very different decade. Tragic for me and my generation. But now I think, well, good for you. Good for you, 80s people. You got your own vibe going. You didn't want anything to do with us. You didn't want anything to do with the guitars. You wanted to do... Now, paradoxically, in America, in 83, 84, that kind of guitar, kind of Malmsteen thing. So I'm sitting at home, you know, and not doing much because it's all DX7s and everything. This guy comes around, he starts playing me this Malmsteen stuff, and I'm going, but we were doing that sort of in 1975, the sort of in the jazz rock era. We were doing that. So basically, it was sort of jazz rock guitar with leather trousers and more bending, and that's kind of and of course it became big in America, and never, this is what I say about America being a guitar country and Britain not, never was popular here. You know, guitarists like it, but people like Satriani and Vai were never a deal, really, not a big deal. So they really diverted, and British popular music went into this kind of no guitar. I mean, people said to me, what are you going to do? The guitar's finished. Okay. So the guitar was practically finished, but thanks to Van Halen particularly, and Vai and Satriani, it wasn't it. The thing that didn't turn it around, but suggested that the guitar wasn't totally finished, was Eddie Van Halen's solo on "Beat It," which is 82, 83. You know, that solo. That had been the first guitar solo on any kind of pop record for ages. So suddenly people are saying, well, perhaps the guitar isn't completely finished. People would say to me, I mean, Mike Ratledge saying, well, the guitar's finished, mate. What are you going to do now? It was like people thought the guitar was all over. And thanks to the American scene, which always liked the guitar, and then in the early 90s, with the what you call the grunge bands in Seattle or whatever, and over here Oasis and things like that, the guitar came back, not sort of shreddy, you know, soloing, but you know, Andy Summers, one of my oldest friends, when the Police formed 77, 78, you know, Sting was really anti-guitar solos. You know, everybody got the kind of the idea of the guitar solo in Britain had become so corny. You mustn't have long guitar solos meant prog rock.
But
so I'm slightly
in some ways, right, things have come full circle. Like now there's a lot of young people looking for something more, who are gravitating back to music like Soft Machine and other.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but that's been going on since the 80s. I've got most of my friends who are very into Led Zeppelin, which I'm not, are people who grew up in the 80s. My best friend here, he's a really great guitar player. He grew up in the 80s, knowing that he didn't like the music of the 80s. So he was listening to like Led Zeppelin, which was music from 15 years before, you know, and Hendrix and these people. This been going on since for 30 odd years that people have been listening to. And when we were put back together again, Soft Machine by Leonardo Pavkovich, and he put it back together, I met him and he said, "Oh, your generation, there's a kind of way you play is very, very special." And I'm going, well, is it? I don't know. But now I begin to recognize what it is. And it's a kind of generational thing. And you cannot imitate, people do imitate everything, but you cannot get the essence of a thing unless it's actually from the time. Now, I was listening to Art Blakey in 1956, playing with Clifford Brown, playing a bebop blues called Wee Dot. And mate, you know, that cannot be replicated now. You can do everything. You can imitate everything. You can play all the notes. But it's 1956. It's bang on the era it's meant to be. It's bang on. So you can imitate Hendrix, but you can't do it. So that's what he meant. And at the time, it was Hugh Hopper, myself, Marshall, and Elton Dean, all from that era. And you know, it gets, you know, so it's very hard for people now. You know why? Because when we were, and there's another thing you wouldn't realize if you're 32, is that when we grew up, you couldn't get old records. You couldn't get old shit. People were amazed I had some Django Reinhardt records. Wow, bloody hell. You know, that's from the past, isn't it? Wow, amazing that you've got those records, because you couldn't get them. So it wasn't like you were consciously saying we're going to play like ourselves. It's just you couldn't get the records to copy or listen to. So you were forced into the moment. Now, what are you going to do? You're going to go on YouTube and you're going to see, I mean, God, if I was, you know, a guitarist, well, I never would now, because you just go on YouTube and you see these unbelievable players from every area playing unbelievable stuff. And you just go, well, I give up. What am I going to do? So then you try and copy something from a particular era. And I so noticed this. When I played with Stéphane Grappelli, didn't want me to play like Django. I played my, whatever you want to call it, fusion stuff or whatever, if you're people watching this want to check out Stéphane Grappelli at the Albert Hall with John Etheridge, I'm playing this long solo on St. Louis Blues. I'm playing an ovation. It's like, I don't know what it's like, but it's certainly not like Django. He didn't want it. He said, don't play like that, play like yourself. So I left that music for years. And when I came back at the end of the 90s, 98, 99, to sort of play that music, although I never wanted to, there again, didn't want to imitate it. I wanted to play acoustic music with violin and guitar. But everybody was doing it like it was a museum piece. Everybody's got exactly the right guitar with exactly the right technique to play exactly like Django, but generally faster. And I thought, things have really changed, because the 70s, we just didn't do that. I'm playing with Stéphane Grappelli, but nobody's telling me that I've got to try and imitate Django Reinhardt. Just do my thing. And it's obviously, if it had to fit the music, it'd be the right notes for the chords. But, you know, and he was really encouraging. I used to play like fourths and things. And he'd go, oh, what is it? What is it you're playing there? And I say, oh, well, I'm playing, it's like the chord built in fourths. Oh, isn't I like to hear that? What is that? Oh, you do it. I can't do it. I'm too old. But you do it. I'm interested, you know. So he didn't want, you know, and when everybody first started joining his group, I mean, like, you presumably know how the Hot Club Quintet sounds. So you go, he go, don't do it. Stop. Now, go. Oh, I thought that was how the quintet plays. Oh, we hated that. I didn't want that at all. He said if that was all he said we only had those people to play with, and they went boom ching boom ching, because he wanted something much subtler. So Disley, who was the guitarist who got me in, he played like Freddie Green, 4 to the bar, but not boom ching boom ching, not the 2-beat. But I don't want to put people off, because, in fact, I said I was never going to say this again, because I remember saying this to a Hot Club fan, saying Stéphane Grappelli hated that rhythm, and he was so mortified. I thought I must never say that again, because to most people that is the soul of the music. And it is, in a way, you know, it is, because that identifies the music as Django and Stéphane and the Hot Club. But when he said, oh, don't play it, oh, I hate it. So, you know, people who are the real thing are not frightened of new things. Yeah. In other words, he just would say, well, I'm an old idiot, I cannot play, I have to play like I play, but you do it, I like to hear it, you see. And that's the mark of something that's not museum. And you know, really, I mean, it doesn't apply to all music, but there's so much in the postmodern era that is replication. And this gets back to what we're talking about with the soft machine. I'm not interested in replicating, you know, and luckily, as we don't have, as you already pointed out, because it's not keyboard based, we're not replicating, you know. So I'm happy with the situation. I mean, I did think, you know, 15 years ago that when everybody popped off, we'd have to pack up. But I have to tell you, everybody knows the situation. They know who's in the band. So nobody's coming along going, where's Kevin Ayres or anything. And it's so great. To me, it's so enjoyable that I'm prepared to put up with the thing that, you know, in some ways. So I think of it as sort of organism. Soft machine is sort of organism, like a football team. They haven't got the same people playing for Manchester United as played 20 years ago, but it's still Manchester United. And I honestly, because it's so good to me, that's why I believe in it, you know. And it's extraordinary. I mean, I never knew this would happen, but it's happened.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopefully I can carry on a bit longer. And I'm not sure I probably won't come to the USA again, although I'd love to, but it probably won't happen. But we'll certainly be pottering around England and Europe and maybe Canada. And, you know, and I say, you know, get the new, because the new album, it's good, mate. I mean, I don't know if it's because my judgment is a bit more kinder because I've got old, but there's a couple of solos on this album which I think are the best I've ever done.
Wow. Really. Is there a title to the new album?
Yes, 13.
13. Oh, wow.
13th album is 13.
Excellent.
And we looked it up, and 13 is very lucky in a lot of countries. So.
Well, this is the first time you guys had a number for a title going back all the way.
I know. So Theo, we thought about it a lot, and he said, "What about 13?" And I went, "Yeah. Well, it's a number again, which is kind of okay." Because I'm sort of almost a numerate. Every time I make an announcement about a tune, one of the old tunes we're playing, I go, "This is from the third." He goes, "No, fourth." I go, "Oh, sorry, fourth." Or what album's this from, Theo? He goes, "7th." I go, "Oh yeah, right." I tell the audience, I go, "Oh, you're 7th," because I get, I think numbering is actually a cop out. So, but we're doing this almost as this is in a way a kind of tribute, numbering this. It's a sort of looking, as it were, respecting the past by giving it a number.
Great.
But I do think albums should have titles.
Yeah.
Do you play guitar?
I play drums.
Okay. Well, look, I just want to have a little beef about Fender amps. Okay. There are all these Fender amps, and they're all named the same thing, like Deluxe River, Hot Cover. Because when I go on the road, I want the Fender the Twin, and I nearly always get a twin reverb, because people go, "Well, it's the same. Why can't they name them?" Sorry. Anyway, sorry, Fender. Sorry, guitar player.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you one question on this point before I let you go. Is how do you name a jazz song?
Well, I'll tell you how I do it. I've got a lot of ways of doing it. Now let's think of one of my tunes. Like I have a tune called "Strange Comforts." Okay. Well, I looked at my bookshelf and there was an Ian McEwan. I think it's Ian McEwan, called "The Comfort of Strangers." So I thought, "Strange Comforts," that sounds good. Then "Broken Hill," for instance, was a track of mine. Of course, it's got to fit the kind of music, but it was T.S. Eliot or something, blah, 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 Broken Hill, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, Broken Hill, yes, Broken Hill. "The Stars Apart" also came from some poet. But it's got to feel right with the song. I go, "Stars Apart," and I imagine the song to myself, and I go, "Yeah, that's all right. "Burden of Proof," that's more common title. And then there was a tune of mine called "Grapehound," and now that became about because we were talking about, Hugh Hopper and I were talking about our audience, and there's a thing called we talk, presumably in America they call it the grey dollar. We call it the grey pound. Okay, which is, in other words, grey-haired people with money to burn. The grey pound. So we're going for the grey pound. That's it, the grape hound. Because, they're all wine drinkers. I mean, Elton and Hugh were wine drinkers. So the grape hound. See?
Yeah.
Clever, eh?
Very,
Clever,
very.
Eh? One of the albums, we had a track called "Dave Acto," right? And that was "de facto" becomes "Dave Acto."
That's good.
Yeah, it's not bad, is it?
Cool.
But the title is the last thing. In some ways, if I was writing songs, of course, I'd start with the title. Definitely you'd start with, and then you'd imagine the words. But the title comes generally last. Although it would be interesting to try and write a song starting with the title. I mean, write an instrumental piece starting with the title, so that what are my two tunes on that? Well, there's one called "Green Books." Now, I don't know why I called it "Green Books," and there's another one which I've dedicated to Balado because it's such a great band called "Balado Ballada." No, but Balado Ballada. And I don't think I haven't told him yet, so I must tell him that I've dedicated it. It's a ballad, slow tune, Balado Ballada. Yeah. Nice, eh?
That sounds great. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
well, John, it's been amazing talking with you. I've really enjoyed it. And
thanks a lot, man.
Great. Everyone look out for the new album, 13.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, in March.
In March, that's right. Okay, John. Well,
okay. See you, Ben.
Yep,
Thanks a lot, man.
Sure.
Bye.
Cheers.